And welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us tonight. Let me fix this real quick. Got a little fuzziness on our picture for you. My apologies to those of you who are just joining us. But anyway, tonight we have a little bit of news from you from around the NBA anyway. Some news involving Cam Reddish, some Serge Ibaka news, some news about the Miami Heat, so stay tuned for that. But let's start anyway in the NBA with that Serge Ibaka news. Now, that seems like his time in Milwaukee hasn't exactly gone great ever since joining the team, and it just seems like it's inevitable that they were going to part ways. Now it seems that they will agree to find a way to find other solutions for each other going forward. Now the Bucks, of course, have a nice front court already with Giannis, of course, taking a lot of the minutes at the 3-4 spot in their lineup. They have they still have Portis and Lopez there as well. So the Milwaukee Bucks lineup still has a lot of length in it. They don't necessarily need a guy like Serge Ibaka, even with his presence as a veteran on that roster. It's just not needed. And so maybe a team that's needing some defensive presence out there, somebody who could be a good bench type player for a team out there, Serge Ibaka might be the fit for you. But we'll see where he ends up getting traded, if he's moved at all, or ultimately released after the trade deadline. But we'll see what ends up happening with him. As for the Cam Reddish news, we saw yesterday anyway that talks were certainly start to get going anyway between the New York Knicks, the Dallas Mavericks, the LA Lakers, among other teams had interest. Today, add the Miami Heat as one of the teams interested in bringing him in. Cam Reddish, of course, hasn't exactly found it very nice for him, very comfortable for him in New York ever since the trade that brought him there from Atlanta. Good on Atlanta for getting a pick back for him at that time. I don't think it's going to cost anywhere near the level of pick that it cost the New York Knicks to be able to bring him in the first place. I do think a couple of second-round picks could be enough to get the deal done. I'd imagine this is kind of a comparable deal for Rui Hachimura from the Washington Wizards. However, I think Hachimura, his issue is more of injuries rather than poor performance or lack of playing time. So I think both players could be had for very similar asking prices. Now, as far as the Miami Heat go, they've gotten off to a nice little run here in recent games anyway, let alone tonight's game where they lost by 25 points to a team in the Dallas Mavericks that's given up over 130 points and is really struggling on the defensive end of the floor over the last 4 games. But we'll set that to the side right now. But the Miami Heat seem to think that they're going to be able to battle themselves back into contention in the Eastern Conference. I don't buy it. I don't see it. And sure, this nice little run of winning that they have until tonight at least has worked in their favor. But they have an aging roster. They don't really have a big outside of Bam Adebayo. This team has a roster that's very incomplete. You see the issues that they have when they don't have size on the floor. And they've gotten a lot of good production out of guys off of the waiver wire. And so that's something they should be commended for. Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, among others. But at a certain point, you just need to have more talent. You just need to have more size. And both of those things, Miami certainly does not necessarily have. Now, Kyle Lowry, of course, has been mentioned as far as as someone who might be available in trade. I don't necessarily think any team would be wanting to go out there and bring in a Kyle Lowry, but the salary there is what Miami could use to bring in another star-level player, or at least a very good, high-level, high-quality player like a D'Angelo Russell. We heard that the Minnesota Timberwolves had no interest in that type of a deal just the other day, and as far as Kyle Lowry goes, with this recent stretch of winning, the Miami Heat front office has since pulled him back off the table as well. I still don't think he's necessarily all the way off the trade block. I think there's still an opportunity if there's a deal that's to be made anyway for the Miami Heat, and if he's the ask anyway for it. I think Miami would part with him in a heartbeat. I mean, he's played nice for Miami, I suppose, but we're talking about Jimmy Butler, we're talking about Bam Adebayo, and Kyle Lowry is not on the level of either of those two players anymore at this point in his career, and so we'll just see what ends up happening with him. But Miami seems to have taken this recent stretch of winning as a sign, a portent of things to come, and I just don't buy it. I just don't understand the wisdom behind it. I understand that that they see winning, and winning is all that matters and all that kind of thing, but you got to understand the types of wins that you're getting. How long is this win streak expected to last? Can you continue to to play this way and get into the playoffs, beat other teams that are ahead of you in the standings? And that's where I think Miami has kind of misjudged their calculus a little bit. We'll see if they reevaluate before the February 9th deadline. As I mentioned, they need some size on this team. They need some extra talent as well. And we'll see if in free agency they're able to spin off some of these contracts that they've done so well in the past, spinning Dragic to kind of a sign and trade deal with Kyle Lowry anyway a couple of years ago. That worked very well at the time. Kyle Lowry's contract right now is more of an albatross than anything else for that Miami Heat team. So getting that off the books, I think, would be priority number one for Miami if they realize exactly what I think they are, is that they're maybe a play-in team that's borderline around the sixth spot at best. And even in that point, if you get into the play-in, if you're able to manage your way into that 7-8 spot in the playoffs, you're getting beat in the first round. That's the whole thing here for the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat are playing for championships. They aren't playing for, hey, congratulations, you made it to the playoffs. No, they want to win. Jimmy Butler's a winning player. He's a very, very, very talented player on both ends of the floor. Very prideful player as well. And so I don't necessarily see how they're going to go about trying to, try to push their way into the back end of the playoffs and then settle for that. I think if they try to push towards the playoffs, they're going to get a big piece in there, like a D'Angelo Russell. Not saying it's going to be him, but if somebody like that would be a nice piece for them to get that could push them up in the standings just a little bit, give them a little bit more juice. If they don't get that kind of thing happening, then I think they have to try to pare it down a little bit and see if they can avoid, being stuck with that long-term deal with Kyle Lowry right now. But let us know in the comments section what you think of the Miami Heat deal. Where do you think Lowry could possibly go? Or do you think they should that he should stay? What deals do you see the Miami Heat doing? Now, we talked extensively about the Dallas Mavericks a little bit last night anyway. We talked about how terrible their defense was. Jason Kidd basically ripped them in public multiple times over the past week, losing on Wednesday to the Atlanta Hawks at home, giving up another 130-plus points. Tonight, they only gave up 90 to the Miami Heat. They had a nice stretch of winning, as I mentioned, with the Miami Heat, but they're a struggling team when it comes to overall talent, and they also struggle with size. Now, the Mavericks, the biggest man they had on the floor at multiple times during this game was Dorian Finney-Smith. He is not a center. He is maybe a smaller power forward, I suppose you could call him that. But he was their center at multiple points in the game against the Miami Heat. When Bam Adebayo was off the floor, you just saw the difference in the game, the way the Mavericks were able to play versus the Miami Heat. And as far as the Miami Heat go, we just mentioned the issues became more and more apparent whenever Bam Adebayo came off the floor. He is so important to everything they do on that team. They need to get some more help for Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. But for the Dallas Mavericks, great job being able to put together a nice defensive effort against the Miami Heat. However, it is the Miami Heat, a team that, as I just mentioned, doesn't exactly have great talent on the offensive side of the ball. I wonder, once Maxi Kleber gets back, how effective is that defense going to be? He is probably their best rim protector outside of maybe JaVale McGee. I think maybe Kleber is probably a little bit better in that regards, honestly, just because Kleber plays more. He's able to play both ends of the floor. He's a good three-point shooter, can move his feet on the defensive end of the floor, and is able to protect the rim a little bit. JaVale McGee is only going to be able to stay in the paint for his offense, and he's going to be a rim runner. On the defensive end of the floor, he's going to be camping out in the paint, and that's all he's going to be able to do. He doesn't move his feet nearly as well as Maxi Kleber. So for the Dallas Mavericks, getting Kleber back is very important to what they want to do defensively. Is there a solution that they could bring in on the outside? Of course there is. One option is out there that's been out there for probably the better part of 2 years now is Miles Turner, a Dallas, Texas native. Somebody I thought they should have gone after a couple of years ago and didn't. Now, whether or not that was Donnie Nelson and the old regime just saying, hey, we're happy with our mix we have now, or if it's Nico Harrison saying, hey, we really like the combination of players we have now, we want to give more playing time to these guys, or that Miles Turner isn't necessarily the type of player that they want to go for. I think that would be a mistake. I think he's a very effective defensive center in the NBA. Outside of Rudy Gobert, I think he's in that top 5 as far as a rim protector, defensive player, somebody who's able to anchor the middle of your lineup, anchor the middle of your defense anyway, and be able to make out or to communicate effectively and vocalize those calls on defense, kind of the quarterback of your defense, if you will. He's also a very good three-point shooter. He's having a very nice year for Indiana. Indiana's had a nice resurgent year. They've got a lot of good young rookies. Over the next year or two, we could really see them make a push to be in the top 4 of the Eastern Conference. Right now, I think they should easily be able to make it past the play-in, maybe even sneak into the number 6 seed before it's all said and done by the end of the season. They still have Buddy Hield. They didn't spin him off like everybody thought they would after the trade for Halliburton that sent Sabonis out to the Sacramento Kings. But they've been a very nice story. But Dallas needs to improve their defense one way or the other. If that's through internal improvements, getting better play out of the guys already on their roster, Reggie Bullock most namely. He struggled mightily with the three-point shot this year. He's not necessarily been as effective as he was last year. And then, of course, you have to consider that Maxi Kleber has been out. Every player or every team has one player that's kind of the glue in the middle for them. Maxi Kleber was that. They're playing Dwight Powell a whole lot more than they had expected to early in the season, and with Kleber's injury, they've had to rely on him yet again. He's been nothing but a good soldier for the Mavericks for years, and he's played very well in that time, but he is not the defensive player Kleber is, and they sorely miss his presence. Now, I think the Mavericks could go out there and make a trade for a good defensive player. I mentioned Rui Hachimura earlier at the top of this video anyway. You guys can check that out here in just a moment. But as far as the asking price for him, I'm expecting that to consist probably of a couple of second-round picks, maybe of a young player back in return. Mavericks could give them that. I would not give them a player off of the roster that's a young player because they don't have much talent in that way. So I'd probably give up more second-round picks if I had to. Maybe give them 3 second-round picks if I really had to in order to bring in Hachimura. He's going to be an RFA after the season, so being able to extend that deal before the end of the season would be paramount to the Mavericks as well. But I really like the fact that he's kind of a 3-and-D player that's added more of a dribble drive to his game as well. He's not just a stand there, wait for somebody else to create his shot for him, catch the ball in the corner and shoot it. No, he's able to drive to the basket, create his own shot. He's really good on defense. He can defend 3 different positions very well: the 2, 3, and 4. Some 2s, the smaller 2s, would give him a little bit of trouble, but he's a very good, lanky defender, and I think he'd be a perfect fit with the Dallas Mavericks. In my opinion, think of what Dorian Finney-Smith has done for Dallas, and just look at Rui Hachimura as more of a better offensive player than what Dorian Finney-Smith is. Dorian Finney-Smith is probably a little bit better on the defensive end, so you kind of take a little bit here, leave a little bit there. But we'll see which moves they ultimately end up making here at the deadline. Again, the Dallas Mavericks are not looking to trade, their first-round picks unless it's for a star-level player to put next to Luka. Now, if that's a player, that hurts their defense even more, I imagine at this point they would say, so be it. Just because of where their defense is right now, it's terrible, and it's going to have to get better somehow. But they need a star more than anything else on this team right now. Luka is having to do it all. We'll see if they're able to address that issue now at the NBA trade deadline or in the offseason. There's another podcast out there that does YouTube as well, Locked On Mavericks anyway. They said for years that they could be patient. They could take their time, find the right piece that fits nets to Luka. I disagreed with that the entire time. I couldn't believe that in any realm of possibility that any team out there would just sit back and let things come to them. I mean, if you want to have good things happen to your team, if you want good things to happen to you as a person, you make them happen. And sure, sometimes things do require waiting. That's true of just about everything in the world. But sometimes you have to go out there and force the issue. The Mavericks tried that with Porzingis. It didn't work. That doesn't mean you stop there and try to, we'll just wait and see if somebody develops on our own. Well, they haven't had any other player really develop outside of Luka since then. Jalen Brunson certainly progressed over the last 4 years while he was in Dallas. They didn't keep him. And that was the second best success story since Luka Doncic has come to the Dallas Mavericks. Now, they said that they could pick and choose which superstar that they wanted to go to. You could hear check out their podcast in the past and just look at how they would pick and choose, nitpick these players. And that's what they said you could nitpick at that time because you had the ball was in your court. You had the picks to go out there and trade. Luka was on a cheap contract. Luka's not on a cheap contract. You lost the picks in the Porzingis deal. Now you have the picks again to go out there and make the deal. Get the deal done. Whatever player you're able to get your hands on that's a star level player that can improve your team, playmaking ability, somebody who can put the bucket in or put the ball in the basket, somebody who can score for you and take some of the pressure off of Luka is exactly what this team needs to do. We saw that the Atlanta Hawks have been able to do that with the DeJounte Murray trade from the San Antonio Spurs. They gave up 3 first-round picks to bring him in. He would have been a fantastic piece next to Luka. A very good defender, was improving on offense as well. Just look at the game he just had against the Dallas Mavericks. Kind of a case in point of how he's able to impact both ends of the floor. Something like that would have been fantastic for Dallas, but here we are. Trae Young and his team, they signed a whole bunch of players, gave big money deals out there to Bogdanovich, etc. They got Clint Capella. They were able to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. Dallas did to the Western Conference Finals last year, but the Dallas Mavericks certainly are not the same team that they were last year, and they need to add another star-level player. Zach LaVine is one of the pieces that could be available here at the deadline. Maybe a DeMar DeRozan from the Chicago Bulls if they decide to tear things down. The Toronto Raptors are already expected to sell here at the deadline. Gary Trent Jr. has been available, but his contract is looking a little bit more of an albatross than it was a year ago when he was an up-and-coming player. He's still only 24, but his shooting numbers have certainly taken a drop. OG Anunoby is probably their best asset right now as far as total overall value. The asking price for him is the DeJounte Murray deal. So maybe the Mavericks could go out there and make something happen, but they're going to have heavy interest from other teams if he is truly on the market. I think a 3 first-round pick asking price for OG Anunoby is a little bit rich, but if he does move, that might be what it ultimately takes for the Raptors to say, I guess we have to do it because the value is just so much in our favor to get 3 first-rounders, whereas 2, you might say, they're about equal. I'd rather hold on to the known commodity in OG Anunoby, especially considering that he has contract control for the next couple of years as well. But thank you guys for joining us here tonight. If you have questions about what's going on around the NBA, please feel free to send us a message. We're going to go ahead and start a live here in just a few minutes. For those of you who have been fans of us with baseball, I told you guys if we saw a trade of Pablo Lopez or Luis Arraez that I would do an emergency live for you guys that night. Well, guess what? We had both, and they were in the same trade. We'll get to that for you guys here in just a little bit, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and follow us on Twitter at UpsideSN. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to post them on any one of our videos. We do try to interact with you guys through that as well. But thank you guys for joining us here tonight. We'll be live for you guys every single evening, Monday through Friday. About 9 o'clock in the evening, kind of run through all the headlines from around the NBA. Tomorrow night, I'll be making a whole bunch of videos for you guys, and I might even do a live game for you. You guys let us know which game you'd like us to do, and we'll see if we can do it. But thank you guys for joining us here tonight again, and we'll see you guys later.